Welcome, everybody, to the inaugural episode of the Seriously Dough podcast. My name is Ken Platt.
I'm Shane Haffey.
And we are really excited for this. It was actually just a few months ago Shane moved into town. And as soon as he moved in, I was like, hey, maybe I should bake this family a pie. And then I saw he started posting on Facebook the pies that he had made. And I was like, well, I guess they don't need my pies.
I can always have more room for pie, though. That's the thing.
And I think you emailed me that, and I was like, I don't know, that's a lot of work, and he's already got pies. But this is a podcast. We are amateur bakers. We're both pastors in Northeast Pennsylvania. Yeah. But this is a podcast all about baking because we both enjoy it, and I think we're both pretty good at it.
I think so. We're learning and messing up all the time, and it's still good to do it.
Yeah, it is, So yeah, we've been talking about this for a couple months now, and so here we are getting it started. So we've introduced ourselves, and let's talk a little bit about how we got into baking. Shane, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, so baking for me, I grew up watching my mom bake, and she's a good baker herself, and my grandfather my grandfather just did basic white sandwich loaf bread, but it was good. We always look forward to it. The smell of homemade bread, there's nothing better. But my mom was always a baker. She taught a little bit of it, but she it was her thing. It was her baby, so it is what it is. But as I got older, I wanted to kind of start to learn how to bake, and some of the first bakes that I made were awful. Like it was just, you'd spend all this time, all this hours putting all your love into this loaf of bread. You'd throw it into the oven and it'd come out and it'd be like hard as a brick or flavorless or that. And so years of failing is what I did. And it really wasn't until I understood the science of bread baking that things started to click, and then it made sense. I knew I knew, if something was wrong with it pretty quickly, I would know that. But really, for me, here recently, the last couple years is when I kicked it into high gear of baking bread, and we rarely buy store-bought bread. Rarely buy it. And that's partly because what got me going on it was one day I looked at the ingredients in bread. And you look at a store-bought loaf of bread and you read the ingredients and you don't know what 3/4 of the ingredients are.
Right, which is not what bread's supposed to be.
Bread is as simple as it can be. Flour, water, salt, and a rising agent. Yeah. That's all you need for delicious bread. And so that was really kind of like, I started asking that question, what am I eating? What is this?
Yeah, that's important.
And then getting a good oven too kind of helped things kick into gear. It was confirming that a lot of this doing was just due to a bad oven, not that. So that definitely helped.
So what kind of what constitutes a bad oven for you?
It wasn't heating evenly, so half the loaf would be like perfect brown, while the other half's like pale white still, and like even rotating it by that point it wasn't working. It just wasn't a consistent even heat.
I just got this picture in my mind of you stoking a fire underneath an oven and forgetting to put wood on the other side.
That's pretty much, I would have been better off with that. Yep, would have been better off with that, and the gas oven. And nice. Once I got the gas oven, that started to work. Here at the new house, the oven's great and works wonderful. So that makes a world of difference too.
Oh man, my dream is to have a gas oven. I've cooked an electric. We had when I first got married, the apartment Renee and I lived in had a gas. It was all gas, and that was really nice. And then it's been electric ever since. Yeah. So someday we'll get back to a gas oven and a gas stove. Yeah. So that's awesome. Yeah, you know what? You've got a man up on me because I may have cooked like one loaf of bread in my entire life, but not like yeast bread, like with that. But a lot of mine has been Was that your whole story?
That was my whole story. I was waiting for you to get going on your story.
So yeah, my story is I grew up. My mother is a baker. Like she's really, really good at it, and not just like little like quick breads. Like and actually most of my mom's stuff is quick breads and pies. So, growing up in the church, we would one of the things that my mom would do for to help fundraise is she'd do like a baked good of the month, and so people would sign up. And I remember the one year she like let as many people as they wanted sign up for that, and it was like $10 a month. And then I just remember my mom having to make like pies and pies and pies, but my mom is known as the pie lady.
Okay.
Right. And so she actually recently, I think it was not this past year of COVID, but the year before, she went to my grandparents' church, and they had called her up and they said, "Will you come help us do pies?" And she mobilized all these church ladies, and they had like this huge, like, what's it called? The assembly line of pies, and like putting together the pastry and the dough and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I remember growing up, my mom always made really good pies, made really good sweet the quick breads like banana bread and lemon bread, and those were staples in like at nice meals that we would have. But also like if we had rotten bananas, my mother always made bread out of it. And she always was really good with that. And so she taught me a little, and then I started to kind of dabble myself. And I've watched, and like making mistakes is such a part of like baking when you first start out. Like you forget to add the baking powder, you forget to add, and like if you forget to add baking, the baking element to like a cookie, you get a flat piece with mounds where the chocolate chips are.
And you never know until you baked it.
Right, and then it comes out, you're like, oh, that happened. And so it's been kind of a thing. And in our house, in my household now, I'm the one who bakes. My wife does bake occasionally, but I bake most of the stuff. And I really enjoy it. I do love the exact nature of it, but then once you understand the science of how things work, and how elements work together, then you can start to jimmy things here and there, like the way you want to. So that's really nice, and that's what's fun about baking, is there is this aspect of like you can experiment a little without ruining. But first you have to learn. And this is what I like about it. You have to learn the basics first.
Oh, yeah.
Like you have to learn, like, how does this cookie go together the right way?
Yeah.
And then once you want to start, I remember this one recipe I made. I was like, I'm just going to throw in more sugar. I think it was like cookie bars or something. I'm like, I want more sugar in this recipe, not knowing like what that would do. Yeah. And it was like gag worthy.
Yeah.
It's like, but I thought sugar makes everything better. Yeah. And you're like, no, sugar doesn't make everything better unless you do it right.
Yep. There's recipes for a reason, folks.
Yeah.
You follow them.
The recipe. If you're not completely familiar with baking and how it works, recipes are your friend. Especially like new stuff that you've never baked before. So today is St. Patrick's Day.
Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Happy St. Patrick's Day. I love the history of St. Patrick's Day. As a pastor and as pastors, we love this stuff. And so, but the history of St. Patrick is he was a slave in Ireland, and he was enslaved by the Celtic people, and he escaped as a young man. And when he escaped, he ended up going to I believe it was England.
Yeah, he kind of made that loop there, up England, from Scotland, and what is known as Northern Ireland now, and then down into the Republic.
Yeah, so while he was making that loop, he came to know Jesus and realized that the Celtic people needed Jesus. And so he rolled back up into Ireland and gave them Jesus, and used a lot of their symbols and a lot of the stuff that they had going there to teach them about Christ and the country of Ireland, the island of Ireland. Came to know Christ. That's a good story. So that's why we celebrate today. And so one of the things we want you to know with how we're going to be doing this podcast is we are going to do the history of the bake. Yeah. So anything we make, we're going to look at what kind of where did it come from? Why did we start making this, right? And why did someone say, hey, we ought to start making whatever we're going to make? So today we baked Irish soda bread, and Ken and I each made a loaf. Ken, do you want to hold up your loaf so they can see it there? Here's my loaf.
We're going to be tasting them here in a little bit and talking about them. this one here is mine. Kind of looks like a four-leaf clover, and or one of those things when we were little with the you count and then you open it up and it gives you your fortune or whatever it is. And
I feel like presentation-wise, you've already outdone me. I mean, that's really nice.
All I did was cut it.
I cut mine too. You can't really see it. But
it's 2 cuts is all that I did.
I saw it post on Facebook on my way here. I'm like, man, nice.
Well, it's all about the taste. It doesn't matter what it looks like.
That's true. It could look beautiful, but if it tastes bad, then...
We'll be honest with how the taste is too. But I want to kind of give a little bit of the history of soda bread in general, and it's been around for centuries. It's mostly associated with Ireland, but it really wasn't utilized in Ireland until the late 1700s, early 1800s. And history actually shows us that it can be found all the way back in the early Americas with Americans, that they were probably the ones that discovered how to use soda and how to use that in their bread bakes. And what they would actually do, they didn't use like bicarbonate soda like we did. They didn't go to the store and buy a box of baking soda. What they did was they made this concoction out of wood ash. They would use wood ash and mix it with things and use the soda from that in their bread, and that was what they used as their rising agent. I wasn't brave enough to do that or try to do that.
I always wondered, like, who's the first person that said, let's burn this tree?
Right.
And now let's eat it.
Yeah, let's eat it. It smells good, so
let's put this in our food.
This was the start of barbecue and soda bread, so it was good. But since today is St. Patrick's Day, we're just going to kind of focus on the history of soda bread in Ireland and kind of see where it came from. And basically, like when you look back at the history of that, one thing that we bakers kind of agree on is that yeast breads are finicky. When you use yeast in anything, there's just so many different aspects of it that you have to get right. And back in Ireland, it was one of those things that they struggled with. Yeast breads were difficult. Yeast breads require a stable environment where there's not a whole lot of moisture or humidity, and the temperature needs to stay consistent, and warm weather. Those are all things that Ireland is not. Ireland is not that. It's a cool country. It's a wet country, and they were living in stone houses, and stone houses inherently are cool. And so it was just one of those things that they struggled with yeast breads. And eventually what happened is that bicarbonate was discovered, and it was starting to become more readily available. And in Ireland at that time, yeast breads it was a rare thing. They couldn't go to the store and buy the commercial dry instant active yeast that we have, so they would use a starter. Starters are finicky as well. You have to keep them fed, you have to keep the proper water temperature, all of that. So yeast, oftentimes you would have to go to a professional baker and buy a loaf of bread from that gets expensive really quick, and it just wasn't readily available. Well, when bicarbonate soda was invented, it started to make its way into Ireland, and they started to realize, oh, you know what? This can be used as a rising agent in bread. Yeah. And so when I say bicarbonate soda, I mean what we know in America as baking soda. And they started to use this, and it paired well with their wheat that they grew in Ireland, which was a kernel wheat. And it turned out that when you combine that with the baking soda, it made a really nice bread. It was quick, it was cheap, and it was easy. It was almost fail-proof, the way that they would be able to make the bread. And they also discovered eventually, too, that they had another problem. Refrigeration was not readily available there, and so they had a lot of milk that would go sour, that would spoil, and they would just traditionally just dump it. They had no use for it whatsoever. But they found out, we combine that with the baking soda, with our soft kernel wheat, the milk, and a little bit of salt, bam, there's your soda bread. And they had that. And what it basically is, there's a scientific, we talked a lot about the science and what how that drew us in. There's a lot of science in soda bread that is fascinating as well. So there's the alkaline levels that are found in the baking soda. And when they mix the acid from the soured milk, buttermilk, and things like that, that's what causes the rise. And when you're baking the soda bread, you have to be quick. You can't allow it to rise because the reaction that takes place is just really quick. But they discovered it, and it worked out good. It became a staple in Ireland, and it pairs wonderfully with like a hearty stew. Like they would take it and they would bake it in fours like this, and then they would just rip off a hunk of the four, and they would use that almost as a spoon when they would eat the stew and stuff like that. Goes great with that.
Oh my gosh, you're making me hungry.
Yeah, and then with a good stout Irish beer, you don't need anything else. But over the years, one of those things that people become passionate about soda bread. Oh, like sure. It's one of those things that the recipe is similar, but there's so many different variants and stuff like that. But it's very versatile too. So you can add things to it. Like you added cherries. You can add raisins or currants to it. You can add onions and cheese and all different kind of things to make it that. And it's just delicious when you have it like that. You can also just use good old Irish butter on it, and that alone, it just stands on its own for that. But if you go over to Ireland and you talk to bakers and that and try to get a good Irish recipe, they'll look at you like you have a third eye. And, one is because they keep those recipes close to their hearts, right. But also they might say something like, you don't need pee, it's like boiling water, right? Yeah. It's just so second nature to them that way. But things have grown throughout that time, and there's bits of super as well that comes with Irish soda bread, things that you see that when you look it up and Google the images and stuff like that, they all look kind of similar. And one of those things is that there's usually a cross in there, right? Yeah. So scientifically, that is just to release moisture, so that way the bread doesn't just grow up and rip and stuff. But it's also superstitious. They believe that marking the cross on the bread protects the house and the household from all of the evil spirits and the evilness that surrounds. So we're well protected here. We're doubly protected with our loaves of breads. The other thing, which I did on my loaf of bread, is I released the fairies. Did you release the fairies?
I didn't even know I was supposed to release the fairies, okay, so I guess they're still stuck in the bread.
So you're learning something new. So you have to poke each side of the cross with your knife just a little bit, and it releases the fairies. And fairies are mischievous, and if you don't release them, things can go wrong with your bake. Right. And so you want to make sure that you release the fairies so that way they stay happy. And one Irish lady that I was watching a video on, she's saying if you had a good night's sleep or if you're pure of heart, when you poke the bread and release the fairies, you might be able to catch a little glimmer of the fairies flying away. Goodness. So this is the sort of thing we're dealing with here, Ken. This is serious business. I need to talk about the great controversy as well. All right, so when it comes to Irish soda bread, there's also what is known as the Great Caraway Schism.
Oh, mercy.
Okay, and so the great debate is whether or not to put caraway seeds into your soda bread. Now, caraway seeds, we in America know them kind of as, like, when we think of rye bread and that taste, that unique taste that comes from rye bread, it's not the bread itself, it's actually the caraway seeds. So the debate is whether or not to put those in the bread. And there's actually households that are divided over this. They've taken it so seriously, they don't talk about it. There's not a whole lot to look up on it, but it's one of those like underlying tensions when it comes to Irish soda bread, whether or not to include caraway seeds or not. Now, those who generally believe that caraway seeds should be added, that's generally a Catholic sort of mindset. So the Catholics would be the ones that advocate yes to caraway seeds. The Protestants, on the other hand, advocate no caraway seeds. So that goes into the history of Ireland, which we do not thankfully have time to talk about today. But it's the Great Caraway Schism. And, it's one of those things that of all the hills you choose to die on, I don't think caraway
seeds.
seeds would be one of them. So did you put caraway seeds in yours?
I only like caraway seeds in rye bread.
Okay. So no for me. I did not either.
Now, why didn't you put it in?
Because I'm a good old Protestant.
So, but you're wearing green.
Because I'm like Ireland.
But Protestant, isn't it the Protestant Irish wear orange?
I don't know. I don't ask too many questions.
I have a friend who's Anglican, and he's so pretentious sometimes. And I love him. And if he listens to this, he'll probably. But he posts, like, not all Irish wear green, like, with an orange background this morning. Yeah. And I thought it was...
That's one of those things, like, my friends in Ireland, they're like, Protestant to you means something different, so we don't talk about that over here. So we're not going to talk about that right now. But but joking around, it's it's an interesting sort of. I didn't add caraway seeds either.
No.
So.
Well, it's funny that you say that. What you were saying before about there's so many different recipes, right? And like even store bought, like even amongst store bought bread, there are so many different store bought Irish soda bread. There's so many different recipes, right? So, like the Irish soda bread you get at Weis is different than what you get at Walmart, which is different than what you get at IGA. I guess it's all in who the baking manager is at the time, but I'll tell you this, like I'm a simple man. And I love like crystallized sugar over the top of my soda bread.
Okay.
And I know that that's probably like some sort of like abomination of Irish soda bread, but again, like and then somebody from my church, she married an Irishman, like a true Irishman, and so her and her in-laws make Irish soda bread, and they'll bring me some, and when I tasted it, I was like, this is like no soda bread I've ever had before. And it was good, but it was just different.
Yeah.
So yeah, like just the different soda bread recipes, it all depends on, it's almost like ask an Italian grandmother how to make sauce.
You're not going to get an answer. They will always leave something out that makes theirs better than yours.
That's exactly
every single time. Yep.
So excellent. So tell me about your process a little bit. Where'd you get your recipe? And
yeah, so I actually just used a variation of Paul Hollywood's recipe. So Paul Hollywood being the host of the Great British Baking Show. And I used a variation of his. It's pretty straightforward. One thing that I saw that was consistent with the recipes is that it's equal parts white flour to whole wheat flour.
Oh, okay.
So in his recipe, I used 250 grams of white flour, 250 grams of whole wheat flour, then a teaspoon of baking soda, a teaspoon of salt, and that's it. And that's so that was the recipe. I had it mixed and baked and cooling on the rack in under an hour. So that was one thing. That's one benefit of it, is that it's such a quick.
It is a quick.
You can throw it together and so I used his rate at 400 degrees for 30 minutes and smelled wonderfully and that. So do you want to try a little bit of it, or do you want to talk about your recipe?
I'll talk about mine, and then we'll
dive in, and they can watch us chew.
They can watch us chew and listen to like our. This is good. So yeah, mine was just an all recipes. I'm a big fan of all recipes. Yes. Constantly, like if I'm not sure what to make, I, just type in the ingredient and it gives me an idea. And a lot of times, like I'll look at the recipe and I'll go, well, I'm going to modify that. But a couple of weeks ago, my son's a Boy Scout here in Honesdale, and just did their corned beef dinner.
Okay.
And so my friend Julie, who actually with Crumb Bakery around here, and like they actually make all the baked goods that are at Black and Brass.
Okay.
But so they make all those baked goods, but she helped make the Irish soda bread.
Okay.
And we started talking about the recipe, and she goes, I just felt like the recipe needed a little more butter and an egg wash. Yeah. And so like that just like stuck in my mind as I'm like thinking about, how am I going to make this? So I looked up in all recipes. It's the top rated one. And I was like, let's just go for this one. And there's no mixture of flour. It's just straight all purpose flour. And, but it called for a cup of sour cream.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm going to replace the sour cream with butter. So I took a cup of butter and mixed that right in with the buttermilk and the eggs. Yeah. And then, and also I had actually asked my wife when she was at Wegmans last weekend. I said, hey, can you pick up some currants for me? And she came home and said, I didn't find currants, but I found cherries. So instead of currants, which I actually love currants, her mom actually makes these Welsh cookies that are to die for, and she makes them for their bake sales for their church. But she always saves a little baggie for me, and hands them to me, and they're like gold to me. I want to make sure that my kids never like them.
So they're all for you.
So they're all for me. But I made so anyways, like I dumped the cherries in, the cherries, the flour, all that. And then it's it looked more like again, like I look at you listen, follow us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram. We should probably say that at the beginning of the episode.
Probably.
But you'll see pictures of everything that we're doing before, after, sometimes maybe even during. We might include some stuff. But yeah, I mixed it up. Like yours was gorgeous, like sitting in the pan. But then but mine looked like just a misshapen blob that I put in. But I cooked it in a which was something I found interesting. So both were cooked in
in the oven or top?
In the oven.
Okay.
Yeah, in the oven. And one of the things that I think I would have done differently, and I think you'll find this, it's my loaf's a little dry.
Okay.
Because I split the recipe in half.
Okay.
Between two skillets, and I think it was in the oven for a little too long.
Gotcha.
And I think we've all been there.
Yeah.
Like you think you're tracking, and I could smell that it was done. Yeah. That's an interesting thing, right? Like you can smell when something is done. And then I started to smell getting like just that little bit of carbon, like.
And that's the thing too, is that it continues to bake even when you pull it out of the oven. So you need to catch it right before it's to that point, because once you catch it, like, it's starting to catch a little bit, it's almost too late at that point.
Yeah, and actually you can kind of see the bottom of mine is a little dark. Like, so you see that it's a little dark, and it does look. Yeah.
Well, that's one thing I forgot in my recipe. I gave off the ingredient list and left off the soured milk that I use. So the recipe called for buttermilk. Well, we in America don't keep buttermilk around usually.
I have buttermilk.
Do you?
Yeah, from my cow that I milked yesterday.
Yeah.
My grumpy cow.
That's right.
You get sour milk from cows.
So there's this neat little hack that you can do, though, that you get. You can sour milk really, really quick. You just, for each cup of milk that you need, you use 1 tablespoon of white vinegar. Yep. And so that's what I did for mine. That was the liquid in mine was I mimicked the buttermilk recipe with that.
And then you got to let it sit for a couple minutes, right?
Yeah, you just stir it up and let that work a little bit, but it worked out okay. But
perfect. All right, so you want to cut yours and then?
Yeah. Do you want mine? We can do proper. We can you can reach in and
snap. All right, so we're gonna
rip off a hunk.
We're gonna break some bread here. Oh my goodness.
So there's that, and then
did you make a second loaf family or?
No, so that's the thing. So I was gonna make a Irish brown bread, like soda bread recipe. I had made that a couple weeks ago, and my family didn't care for it too much. Yeah. They didn't like the soda flavor, so I just made the one loaf, and if there's any leftovers, I'll probably take them a little bit, but they're not too big.
First of all, this smells fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
We don't have any proper Irish butter, but we have Creamworks butter, which is homemade by a lady in my church, and so Stacy made it for us.
If you're from Honesdale, you're hearing all our little like name drops. We're actually not sponsored by any of these people, but it's just what we prefer.
Yeah. Yep. And it's delicious butter. So if you want to help yourself to that a little bit,
I'm gonna rip off a hunk here from the inside.
Yep.
Oh my gosh, it's so soft.
Now I baked mine this morning because I wanted to see too, like, the accuracy of, like, is it really this quick of a bread? Is it that easy to do? Yours yesterday.
I did, but you know what? It's such an easy bread to make that I made it with all my kids. Like my 2-year-old was running around me like feet, and it was very chaotic in my house, but I managed to pull it off. So I'm gonna take a bite here. The bread's nice and soft and dense. That's cool, soft and dense.
Yeah,
that's
that makes sense, huh?
I wonder what this is gonna sound like. Me chewing into the microphone.
We were supposed to take turns in case one of us needed the Heimlich maneuver, but
we're good. This is moist enough that no one's gonna choke and die. That's really good.
Thank you.
I like how basic it is. You know, it's not like I'm not thinking through flavors. I'm just enjoying the texture of the bread, and it's really, really good.
I like getting the crust. So that's one of the other things that's a little bit divisive. Like, my wife doesn't like a hard, crunchy crust, but I do. And so, like a bread like this, she would go right in for the center and kind of pick away the crust a little bit. I like the crust. Like, give me the crust as much as you can, and I'm going to take one little bite with the butter, and then we can dive into yours if you want to get yours ready.
Yeah. One of the things that I noticed with this recipe as I made it is the consistency of the bread, of the dough was very much like a scone. And so it felt like a scone as I was mixing it, but it also, like, if you're watching, you can see that, like, it looks like a giant scone. A giant scone.
And if you flatten it out more when you bake it, so like with the heel of your hand, if you flatten it out to where it's nice and thin, they actually use it for scones as well.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's right on with that. And
all right, so I'm cutting through this. It's got that nice egg wash, so it's got that crispy crust. So
butter makes it better. So like I try
butter
to
makes everything better.
A couple pieces of it with just plain, and it gets a little bit hard to swallow, that sort of thing. Like it kind of gets stuck. Butter breaks it up. It makes them so much nicer.
All right,
but
so
I can't wait.
Have at it.
Yeah, that's good.
Is that good? The cherries are tart.
Yep.
Right, and so I'll be honest. Like when I first tasted it this morning, because I made it last night, and then I told Renee this morning, I said, you know what, I think I'm just going to make another one this afternoon with currants, if I can find them in home sale. Which, if you say they're at Walmart.
I think they're at Walmart. I think that's where Medina found them.
But then after I ate a couple slices, you know what I like to do with this bread is I really enjoy toasting it. Like cutting a nice slice and popping it in the broiler. And then putting some nice soft butter over the top.
Yep.
And that's just on point. So
that tastes a lot like a scone. It has that similar kind of texture, that sort of thing. You can tell you use all-purpose flour, and there's no wheat flour in it. It's that different consistency.
Right.
But delicious.
I'm low class like that.
Well, it's just different variations, and that's one of those, like, the fruit adds to it. I was telling Ken earlier that I was really tempted to do cheddar cheese and onion.
Oh my gosh, it would have been so good in this.
But I wanted it was that experiment of, like, I want to see how easy this really is, and that's a variation that I want to do, is like a nice strong cheddar cheese with some fresh onions. I bet that is delicious.
Well, and like adding stuff like that it's easy. Like you just dump it in, and you put it in. I'm giggling because a TV show that recently featured the idea of folding stuff in cracks me up. But if you know, you know. Yeah. But also, like, Shane actually brewed some good Irish tea.
That's right. So I believe you have Barry's Irish tea, and I have Lion's Irish tea, and that's what they would drink it that way. They would have a slice of soda bread, have a nice strong cup of tea, some Irish butter, and
I feel like that's something that America is missing, is tea time. Like I feel like that would be a great cultural shift if we started doing tea time.
Yeah. And
we had a good homemade, like, biscuit or scone,
and then follow that with a Mexican siesta.
Yeah, right.
And
Listen, this is America. We can do whatever we want. Yeah. Oh, that's so good. Well, thank you so much for joining us on our first episode. And one of the things that we're also going to be doing is we'll be inviting guests on. Maybe our baker mothers will come in. I also have a baker sister. She's pretty phenomenal. She makes some really, really good food. She makes a lot of really good jellies. She's won awards at, like, state fairs and stuff. Cool. And she has, I guess, her sourdough starter is legendary. I'd like to do sourdough sometime. Like, we're gonna have to, but we'll need like a month in advance so we can make starters.
Get our starters going. Yeah,
but that'll be a good conversation to have. But I think next episode we're gonna do
Hot cross buns is what I think.
Hot cross buns. So that'll be getting closer to Easter. Easter's in 2 weeks.
Yep.
It's early.
In Holy Week, we might be release the episode of, because that's a traditional thing that they would eat on the Holy Week. So either like on Thursday or Good Friday, they would have that like hot cross bun treat. It's a traditional thing.
And we'll tell you why next time on the Seriously Dough podcast. Yeah. Thanks for joining us. Make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And follow us on Instagram, follow us on Facebook. Let us know what you thought of the episode. We'll post our recipes, right? We'll post our recipes?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll post the links to the recipes that we use and some pictures. We look forward to continuing this. And thanks for joining us. And we'll talk to you next time.
Have a good week.